Greetings. This episode of the Small Triumph Sports Library and Archives channel is a short addendum to the engine update I did on my previous video. I'm just going to try to clean up a couple or several inadequacies with that update. If that's of any interest to you, stick around. So the first thing I want to address is a question that I knew I was going to get, and I neglected to address it in full when I recorded the previous video. And that is, hey, why didn't you remove the crankshaft from the beginning, or at least earlier than you did? There are a couple of reasons for this. They're not great, and they are both just really related to my inexperience tearing into engines. The first one was when I approached this engine and I realized it was seized, the idea from the beginning in my mind was to do minimal deconstruction in order to get the crankshaft turning, at which point I was going to clean everything up and oil everything up and just set the engine aside. So I still had that kind of, don't do any more tear down than you absolutely have to mentality while I was working on the engine, even though it was kind of ridiculous because I had already had to tear things down a great deal, and the additional steps required to go ahead and try to wiggle free the crankshaft were not a lot in the grand scheme of things. But I still kind of had that mentality, on top of the fact that I had hoped, and I did mention this in the video, I had hoped that maybe if we got lucky and drove out the most stubborn pistons first, that maybe the crank would start moving without having to tear the thing completely down. So consequently, we started out by driving pistons out around the crankshaft. The other thing was just inexperience insofar as I really didn't know, if I took all the main caps off, how easily the crankshaft might, wiggle free from the con rods. I was actually surprised that the crankshaft came free as easily as it did when there were 3 connecting rods still on it. And it may have, in fact, come free quite easily from the beginning, and that would have saved a lot of time and effort. Consequently, I can say that if I had it all to do over again, I would start by trying to wiggle the crankshaft free. Although, that said, I am glad that we drove out number 1 and number 6 in the way that we did, because it was kind of an interesting learning experience. But in hindsight, if I had it to do all over again, might have tried to wiggle the crankshaft free from the very beginning, and I certainly would have gone ahead and tried to wiggle it free once we had gotten the first 2 pistons out. One of the things that I want to do is show some of the key things that we used in order to do the work. Of course, I described this in the previous video, but I didn't have good images at the time. And the main thing that I want to focus on here is the aluminum pieces that we used. So you can see there a couple of aluminum bars, and then also a large aluminum cylinder, which came in handy. It's about 2.75 inches in diameter. You can probably guess what we used it for, but I'll show you in just a moment. Now, I explained the work that we did in the previous video, but I didn't really have the material I needed or any footage, video footage, anything like that in order to actually show what we did. So I'm going to use this video to kind of demonstrate the work that we did. I was not going to reenact the work. I've temporarily buttoned the engine back up and set it aside. I'm in the middle of a very busy period at work, so I was not going to do a full reenactment, but I did take some of my new video equipment and use it in order to do some goofy demonstrations, which I will show you now. So this is the aluminum bar that we used to get around the crankshaft and drive the pistons out from the bottom on both sides of the wrist pin or gudgeon pin. There's my little reenactment of that there. And you can see that this bar was really the perfect size for doing this work. As I mentioned in my previous video, we did have to make sure that we were hammering equally on each side and also guiding it a little bit using the connecting rod, because there was a tendency to rotate in the bore a little bit as shown, and then the connecting rod would foul on things. We also had this aluminum cylinder, which was the perfect size for driving the pistons out from the top once the crankshaft was removed. And you can see it's just almost a perfect fit for our slightly sub 3-inch size pistons and bores. Maybe that's in some way clarifying. It did give me a chance to do some kind of live action recording of work and practice with that a little bit. So some benefit to me in that regard. And as I warned you, it's kind of goofy, but hopefully it actually serves a purpose. One last thing I want to mention in this video. Right before pollen season hit, and right now everything is yellow where I live, but right before pollen season hit, I did decide to go in and finish my water pump. I had cleaned it up. I mentioned that in a previous video. It just really just needed paint, and so I finally got around to that. So I ended up using this Duplicolor engine primer and engine paint, and I'm really happy with the results that I got. Mentioned in a previous video that I had blasted and prepped the water pump housing last summer, and then I never finished it. So it sat around. It was still clean. It still looked pretty good, but I went in and redid some of the prep work, of course, before I sprayed primer on it, and here it is. In the process of being primed. And then this is the finished version. I decided to go ahead and attach the various bits and pieces to the water pump housing temporarily. I used extra gaskets, or in the case of the thermostat housing, I just cut a temporary gasket out of cardboard and just kind of screwed it down lightly just to keep everything together. But I'm really happy with the finished result. I put the water pump on it. That water pump was rebuilt by Flying Dutchman. It's the upgraded version, but everything looks pretty good, and I'm generally happy with it. That's all I have for now. I've been working for a little while on a video that revolves around a model of a Le Mans Spitfire that I got for Christmas, and I was just going to make a short video about that, but I've really enjoyed the research, and it's developed into a bit of a larger project, so it is taking me a little while to get that together. I'm excited about it. I hope it turns out well when I get there and finally pull everything together, but we'll see about that. I do have more content coming in the meantime. Thank you for watching, and please take care.